All right, welcome back to the channel, everybody. We're going to do another scat video. We're going to cover the 70s since we've covered every other era that we can. So let's give a little love to Dr. J and Kareem and whoever else comes our way. Let's get right to it. As usual, give Scap some love and give me some love on my channel if you can.
The
I'd appreciate it.
GOAT, greatest
Here we go.
player of all time. A debate which has been percolating around various NBA hot stoves for the better part of 60 years. But in the face of massive pace of play differential, defensive rules adjustments, and general league dynamic changes from one era to the next, it is fundamentally impossible to compare players from different eras. The better way, therefore, is to establish era-specific dominance by determining how great an individual player was against their peers, how forcefully they reigned over their generation of players. But when and where does an era begin and end? The cleanest and most precise way to break these eras up is by decade, and generally the individuals who owned each decade, beginning in the 1960s and running all the way until today, are the players most commonly found in these top 10 conversations and GOAT debates.
Every time I see that clip, I think, I've got those shoes. Where are you?
Top 10
There they are. It's the only pair of Jordans I ever had, and well, still to this day have.
conversations and GOAT debates. But who are the GOATs of each decade, and how thoroughly did they dominate their specific eras? In order to determine the greatest players of all time, I am embarking on a 7-part series to break down each decade.
Goddamn.
Welcome in to episode 2, the 70s. And on the heels of the 1960s, where the NBA saw in the form of Wilt Chamberlain the most dominant individual specimen in league history, and its greatest winner in the form of Bill Russell, the 70s, though, were not so clear-cut. As
Yeah, all I know, I mean, okay, about the 70s, Bill Russell retires. Kareem starts playing against old Wilt Chamberlain, and they were like buddies at one point, and then they kind of Wilt started like hating on Kareem for some reason or another. Outside of that, and Dr. J, like I don't know who's going to contest in this era as far as the goats go.
as this decade presented us with the most parity-ridden 10-year span in the sport's history. There were no repeat champions in this decade, while the LA
Wow.
Lakers and Boston Celtics were the only franchises to win more than one title in this 10-year span, and
No
they
one went
both
back to
won
back.
just 2. In addition to the overall competitive balance in the NBA during this decade, the pace of play and rampant scoring outbursts from the 60s were substantially curtailed, with
Oh yeah, we're gonna see like Iceman, George Gervin as well, right?
scoring drastically lowering from the 60s unbelievable 115 point per night averages to just 108.3 per night in the 70s.
Okay.
But that wasn't the end of the
108
changes that the
0.3
league
per
had in
game.
store for it in the decade of the 70s. As on August 5th, 1976, the ABA merged with the NBA,
yeah.
welcomed in the Indiana Pacers, New York Nets, Denver Nuggets, and San Antonio Spurs, thus ushering in
Dude, real talk. I totally forgot the Spurs were in the ABA.
the modern era of NBA basketball. And finally, 3 years later, prior to the 1979 league year, the NBA would introduce the three-point line on what
yeah.
was initially a 1-year provisional trial. Yeah, the 1970s was a bit of a transitional decade for the NBA. And despite there being no dynastic teams in this decade, and no team winning consecutive titles, oddly enough, this decade did feature 2 of the greatest handful of teams in NBA history, and they were presented to us in back-to-back seasons and in the first 2 seasons of the decade at that. As in the 1970-71 league year, the Milwaukee Bucks, led by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Oscar Robertson, ran through the playoffs with a 12-2 record to capture the franchise's first NBA title. Kareem was Finals MVP and the league MVP that season, leading the Bucks to a 66-16 regular season mark.
Real talk. What was Kareem's original name? What was his birth name? Was not Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Stick it in the comments down below. Let's see if we can get this.
Mark, which at the time was the second highest win total in NBA history, behind only the 68-win 1966-67 Philadelphia 76ers. Not just that though, but the 1970 Bucks that season produced a per-game net differential of plus 12.26 points per game, which at the time was the highest win margin per game for an 82-game season in NBA history. And it still, to this day, is the second largest margin of victory per game for a single season. But it only lasted at the time as the highest total for that 1 year, as in the very next league year in 1971-72, arguably the greatest team in NBA history came along. And after a decade of heartbreak and failure, which included 7 finals losses during the 1960s, the LA Lakers finally got over the hump
Jerry West
in
finally got one.
resounding fashion, as the 1971-72 Lakers won 33 consecutive games that year,
Damn.
which is still the all-time NBA record. They also set that aforementioned differential record at plus 12.28 points per game, breaking the Bucks record from the year before. And this mark still stands as the highest in league history. All of this on the way to their record-setting 69-win regular season, which stood as the
I didn't know they won 69. Jesus.
Highest in NBA history until the 95-96 Bulls 72-win campaign, which came 25 years later. And in the playoffs, Jerry West would finally get over the hump alongside Finals MVP Wilt Chamberlain and Gail Goodrich. Despite these two
and I guess we can call those two teams the best teams of all time. You know, the Bulls and then this Lakers team, because it would be gold, man, but they didn't win that ring. They lost it in the finals, but the Lakers did a job and the Bulls did a job.
Teams' historical single-season dominance. Neither were able to defend their titles, and the remaining decade would see a mixture of different teams and players winning. The NBA also saw some ABA stars come in and become dominant.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Phil Jackson was a Knick, and I think he won a championship with them in the 70s. I think he came off the bench, but still.
Players in their own right during this decade. Rick Barry, who joined Golden State in the 1972-73 season, was one such player, becoming an immediate all-star for 6 consecutive years upon his re-entry into the NBA, while producing yet another great historical single-season run within this decade during 1974-75, as Barry scored 30.6 points per game that year, which was second best in the NBA, while leading the league in free throw percentage, steals per game, and finishing 6th in the league in assists per game.
Dude. 30.6, 6.2 assists, 3 steals. Damn. 90% at the free throw line. That's fuck. That's insane. Those 3 steals. Good job, buddy.
Game that year. Barry was named first team All-NBA that season and Finals MVP, en route to leading the Warriors to the NBA championship, which would be their last until the 2015 season. Also joining the NBA in the 1976-77 season after a 5-year career with the ABA, Julius Erving. And while the high-flying doctor wouldn't win his first and only NBA championship until the 82-83 season, alongside Moses Malone on that legendary Philadelphia 76ers squad. In the 70s, Dr. J was a 2-time champ with the ABA as a member of the New York Nets, and he would make an immediate impact with his dunks and general playing style, which is largely credited as the precursor to this modern-day game. And along the way within the decade were some other great individual.
Real quick take here. Before Magic and Bird came around and started gaining some popularity for the NBA, Dr. J was a big deal. So him, you know, NBA and the NBA merging and Dr. J coming on board, that was a huge deal. and then Bird and Magic took it from there, and then Jordan just brought it to all new heights after that. And now we have a freaking monster of a sport where people are getting paid like 40 million a year. It's fucking crazy. It's crazy where it came from.
Players, such as the 1974-75 NBA MVP Bob McAdoo, who also led the NBA in scoring 3 consecutive seasons from 73 through 75, with per-game averages over that 3-year span of 32 points and 14 rebounds per game.
Damn.
And while McAdoo would ultimately win 2 NBA championships, that wouldn't come until the 80s as a member of the dynastic Lakers. And this decade produced other noteworthy players, such as Walt Frazier, Elvin Hayes, and towards the end of that decade, Moses Malone, who would rise to more prominence in the following decade. And so, without any star players hoisting any significant amount of hardware in this decade, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar surfaced as the most individually dominant.
Did he only win the one with Milwaukee, though? No way, right? Did he just win one over there? That's with the Lakers?
For his part, he did capture 2 NBA championships in this 10-year span. One as a member of the Milwaukee Bucks to start the decade in 1970, and one as a member of the LA Lakers.
Okay, so yeah, I guess I was right. One with the Bucks and then one with the Lakers. And then that was the last championship that they won until Giannis brought him to a champion, or got him a ring a couple of years ago. So they had a hell of a drought. Not as bad as my Suns, but that was a hell of a drought there, Ron.
In the 1979 season to end it. During the 70s, Kareem averaged 28.2 points per game, which was the highest of any player for this decade, while scoring 21,814 total points, the third most in NBA history for any decade aside from Wilt Chamberlain and Oscar Robertson, both in the supercharged pacing of the 1960s.
And before there was Jordan's fadeaway, there was the skyhook as far as unblockable shots. It's crazy.
And so, while Kareem was the most individually dominant player of this decade, he wasn't really able to parlay that dominance into winning until Magic Johnson came to town in the 1979 season, which would lead to Kareem winning 5 of his 6 career NBA championships, 4 of which would come in the decade of the 80s. But with no other players winning at a prolific rate in this decade, Kareem becomes the GOAT of the 70s based on his individual dominance. And while this does conclude our look,
wow, this did not go as the way I thought it would. I mean, I guess I never really thought about it. Yeah, Kareem got 2 rings in the 70s. That was it. He had the majority of his success with Magic Johnson. Crazy. We really got to give Magic a little more credit. We really do.
Look at this decade of the 70s. Make sure to subscribe and tune in.
Okay. Do it. Do it.
For the next episode of the GOAT by Decades, when we take a look at one of the most compelling 10-year spans in NBA history, which has arguably the largest collection of all-time NBA greats, the 80s. Until now.
Okay, so 70s, I mean, I guess since it was a transitional period with the ABA and all that, like it was a healthy league. It was spread out and somebody different was winning a championship pretty much every year. I guess that's not bad. That's kind of a good thing. But we can't really say there was a go to the 70s now, can we? I mean, because nobody dominated. There was a lot of great individual players, but nobody actually like dominated the league. So that was interesting. I'm gonna put in a request here for my fans. You guys help me out a lot with the Bill Russell stuff. So can anybody suggest some really good Kareem Abdul-Jabbar videos? I'd like to. I know quite a bit, but I feel like there's a lot more I could learn about Kareem, and time to pay some respect to him. So if you guys can suggest some cool videos on Kareem, I'll definitely cover them. And that's gonna do it for this video. I'm still kind of shocked. It didn't go the way I thought it would. But Shoot Scap a like and subscribe. I'm going to link the original video down below in the description as always. And if you wouldn't mind giving me a like and subscribe and throwing in a comment, it would really help out the channel. And I appreciate y'all. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.